Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting.
The Democratic Republic of Congo, most people would fail if they were asked to identify that on a map, and very few people would know much detail about it. What is this place, and describe it for us?
Well, the Democratic Republic of Congo is very central to the African mass. It's right in the middle, and it's a huge bit of dirt. It's actually pretty well the size of all of Western Europe put together, and it is pretty well landlocked as well, except for a little narrow arm that comes out to the western coast, and it's bordered by 8 countries. So that gives you a bit of an idea. It's the old Belgium Congo in the colonial period, but now called the Democratic Republic of Congo.
This is also a part of the world which has had more than its fair share of troubles. It is a place which is known for violence and, or to an extent, instability as well.
Exactly. Since 1996, the Democratic Republic of Congo has had protracted war and civil war, and even now is very, very disrupted, and there have been over 5 million people die in Congo since 1996. So that gives you a little bit of the feeling for just how troubled this land is. A lot of this is to do with mineral wealth. It's an extremely wealthy country in minerals. It has gold, uranium, copper, cobalt, casterite, diamonds. Everything you can imagine is there, oil included, and yet it is mismanaged, and people are generally fighting over access to those minerals. Unfortunately, not only Congolese, but neighbouring countries are involved, and countries from outside who have interest in particularly the uranium in the country.
In terms of the work that you do there, in some ways, I suppose, on the global scale, quite a small mission, but having a tremendous impact on this part of the world.
Yeah, I think our mission boxes above its weight. It's connected with the Open Brethren churches, or Christian Brethren. It's called Mission Garangans in Congo, but it was established in 1886 in Congo, so it was the very first European missionary endeavour to go into that part of Africa. And from establishing from there, it has grown, and in the province that we work in, Joy and I, we have 1,300 churches. We have 350 secondary and primary schools, which are mission schools. That means we have 100,000 children every scholastic day in those schools.
Wow.
We have 7 major hospitals and dozens of clinics. So the opportunity for taking the gospel via all those channels is enormous, as you can imagine.
I mean, it sounds like a fantastic result, and that combination of communicating the gospel, of education, but also healthcare. Are the people of the Congo open to that?
Very open. There is no opposition to mission involvement, whether it be our sister missions like Pentecostal Elam, or the Methodist, or the Presbyterian, the Baptist, and ourselves, of course. The Catholic mission has a large work in Congo as well. So there is an openness to being involved in Congo in mission endeavour, and a receptivity too from Congolese people who, when they come to faith, tend to be people of real faith. They really do trust and believe God.
Is it a dangerous place to work?
It is very dangerous, really. This year has been one of our most troubling for Joy and I. We were there earlier this year, and we were actually held up twice at gunpoint during our journeys into the interior. There has been a lot of murder this year, a lot of killing through militia groups. Some of this is my activity. Some of it is military commanders taking advantage of the chaos in the country. Others of the atrocities are being played out by the military of the land, who are coming in to try to fight off these various factions or groups, but are often very indiscriminate in the way that they go about their business. So very, very difficult, very violent at this stage.
Some people would say that this looks too hard, that this place is, well, politically a basket case. It's a very violent place to be, perhaps particularly when you look like an outsider. Do you think that your work is making a difference? Is it worth the risk from your point of view?
Well, the statement has actually got a lot of weight and truth. It is really a very difficult place to have success in as expatriates going into the country. But the thing we need to realize is God has already raised up an army of Congolese. For example, in all our 1,300 churches, not a single expatriate like me as an elder or a pastor there. They are completely indigenously run. All our schools are completely indigenously run. So that's thousands of teachers literally involved in that. In our medical work, we only have one hospital with 2 missionary nurses. All the others, including our training hospitals, are indigenously run. So the answer, I guess, is what do we do about mission work? Do we go and do it, or do we support those that God has already raised up and equip them, give them the resources so that they can affect that mission work with even greater impact?
It would seem a difficult place to make a difference, and looking at some of the statistics of or the violence and I suppose the disruption within the nation, very difficult to get anything achieved. Having said that, though, yes, there's negative statistics, but also some very positive things happening in this part of the world.
Absolutely. And for us as a mission, that positivity comes through people like yourselves who pray for Congo, who also give resources or money to mission work that is going directly to indigenous pastors or literature or medical work. All of these are channels for advancing the gospel in that land. So the good news is that we're seeing exponential growth in churches in Congo. I think for me, the biggest miracle is not necessarily a dramatic healing, although we love that when it occurs. The greatest miracle for us is that people come to faith and their eternity is secured. And there we're seeing that on a regular basis in Congo through the preaching through churches and in the hospitals with our chaplains, our teachers who are teaching a Christian curriculum, our disability centres where people are not only getting alongside and helping these people, but also sharing the gospel with them and giving them an eternal hope.
I mean, a difficult part of the world to work in, but it must be also very difficult for the indigenous Christians as well, in amongst all of the violence and disruption to live out their life, to raise a family, to communicate their faith. But in amongst that, I mean, you would have heard many stories of people managing to do this.
Absolutely. They're not immune from all the things that happen. Christians, along with everybody else within that society, are suffering as a result of the toing and froing of war and violence. There is a lot of rape, for example. I heard recently it being declared the most difficult country in the world to be a mother, and I can really believe that. But what I've heard from Christians, when I first went back in there after the major war, and I asked them, well, what did you do during this time? How did you survive? And you know, the way they answered me was like this: we met in the mountains, we met on the riverbanks, we met in the fields. They continued to meet. Congolese Christians are not shaking their fist at God. They're a people of faith. They really trust and believe in God. And in the midst of some of those collapses in their own situations or their own stability, they have continued to function as a unit, as a church. And there's been cross-pollination across all the different communities during these troubled periods, which has been good for the church. Men and women have suffered immeasurably, and they've had to go back and rebuild their houses, rethatch their roofs, start afresh, cultivating their gardens. Nothing but hard graft and subsistence level living. But the church has a key role in being the encourager in that environment. To be able to come back to an area and still gather with Christians is a hugely significant advantage that Christian people have. And they've done that with real vigour. And I believe that that has been what has really supported them in this difficult period.
What may be most surprising to people is that we haven't heard more about the situation. That yes, there are terrible things happening in other parts of the world, but perhaps the scale of what's happening in the Congo is even more significant. It isn't something which perhaps captures the imagination of the Western media. It isn't a story that is told that often in the West. Why do you think that is?
There's a tragedy involved in that, and I think partially it's to do with the fact that as long as Congo is in chaos, even Western countries and some big Asian countries are able to get in there and rob the mineral wealth by supplying arms to various militia groups. The uranium in that land, the gold, the diamonds, all those things, the custody. Every one of you who picks up your cell phone or is working with your computers need to know that those minerals are coming from places like Congo, which has the purest of these minerals in the world. And so people turn a blind eye to it. And there is a tragedy really that is happening there in Congo. We're clamouring at the moment to find justice for Syria because of a number of people tragically killed. But we forget that there's this massive land that has lost 5 million of its people, and we do nothing because it doesn't affect us. And I think perhaps that is the greatest tragedy, and one that needs to be addressed by ourselves and our consciences.
It's a part of the world that you and your wife Joy have poured your lives into. In terms of what you're wanting to achieve, is there something where you would say, actually, at that point we would know that we've done what God has called us to do?
Yes, there is, and I'm glad you've asked me that question, because for me it is that people in our Western nations and New Zealand and other parts of the world would understand that God has raised up indigenous Christians to take the gospel to their own people. And to me it doesn't matter if it's Fiji or Papua New Guinea or Chad or Zambia or Congo. These are men and women who are able, because it's their culture, their language, they're going to stay there. They're going to be able to advance the Christian message and the gospel dramatically. So I believe that the message that I would hope people grasp is that indigenous mission makes sense. Why do we not support our own indigenous Christians in these lands?
Well, Murray, we certainly thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you very much for being part of the program today.
Thank you also. Yeah.